One of the most beloved conversations is our red chair. The wonderful, the amazing Amy Friedman. Amy is the head of Kids and Family Programming at Warner Brothers Discovery. That's quite a long title now these days. But to us, she's a beloved advisor, a guider, someone who gives us a wonderful, empowering, inspiring voice as we move the Children's Media Association forward. So without further ado, I will turn over to you with Andy. And let you take on the red chair.
Right. Welcome to the Red Chair Chat, and we're going to call this one the Red Chair Chat LA edition. It's 12 years old, and up until now, it has always taken place in New York, where I live. And post-COVID, we decided to move it to where the action is, where all of you are, to LA, because why not? And so this is the return of the Red Chair post-COVID, and I got to say, I've been here for about a week. I feel so relaxed. LA rocks. It really does. It smells
You're finally
good.
realizing
it
this.
Feels good. I'm going back tomorrow, but it's good for you. You made a good choice. So a little context before we hit Andy, which is that these red chairs, well, not exactly, red chairs that look a lot like them, but are made of cloth and are very, very kind of worn in, shall we say, sat in my office at Nickelodeon, where I grew up, and I was there for a very, very long time. I was there from 1987, when Nickelodeon was about the size of this group of people. And I was there for, it depends on how you count, but 23 to 28 years. So, and these chairs, or chairs like them, sat in my office. So as you can imagine, because it was pre-COVID and we all worked 5 days a week in an office. Remember that? No, I can't imagine it ever again. But we all worked at the office 5 days a week, and over the days and over the years, many, many people, many of whom were actually sitting in this room, sat in the red chairs. And we had juicy conversations about work, and we had deep conversations about life. And mostly, it was a mixture of those things. And so the Red Chair Chats were born out of that idea that work and life enhance each other, and the synthesis between who you really are as a person and what you then bring to work makes both of those things better. And so that's the raison d'etre. The structure has always been the same since day one, which is it's 20 minutes about life, it's 20 minutes about work, it's 20 minutes of questions and answers from you guys, so please, please think of them. That's always the funnest part. And then we drink. Which
If
we've
you haven't
already
started
started doing. Yeah, exactly.
For them.
That we drink more. Other fun thing is that we have 4 alums of the Red Chair, people who have sat in these very chairs over the course of the 12 years that we've been doing this. And as a launch of CMA LA, you're going to hear from those people. And those people in order, Nancy Cantor is here, and she was my first Red Chair. And Tom Aschheim, who's in the front row, he wasn't the second, he is here. Fred Seibert, he's over there. Suzanne Daniels' parents are sick, and so she could not be here. But I had breakfast with her the other day, and I asked her this question. I'll tell you her answer. And where is Tara Sorensen? Where are you?
Front of Fred.
There's Tara. Tara was, I think it was like 3 months before COVID. Tara was my last Red Chair in New York. And by the way, can I just say, you people in LA are so fancy. When I do this in New York, I am literally, the real Red Chairs live in my basement. I lift them out of the basement and put them in my red minivan, and I drive them into the city. There is no makeup artist, there is no nothing. So you're fancy, I like it. But
Don't tell everyone we had a makeup artist.
Yeah, exactly. So enough about the alums. We have Andy Yateman. And as you may or may not know, Andy has had many stints at many major companies, Disney. He was a founding father of Netflix Kids. You were employee number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And now he is at the juggernaut company that I think is creating a lot of change in the way that we do the content business, the juggernaut called Moonbug. And there he was employee number 2, right?
In the U.S.
Okay.
In the U.S.
And he is the managing director. He
If
runs
nobody
the-
from England is here tonight, then yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
He's the big boss. What I have noticed, Andy, about you from afar and now from up close, and it has been very fun getting to know you, by the way, so hi, is that Andy
It's been a little scary.
His mom is a therapist, though, so, you know, he's used to it. Anyway, what I have noticed about you is that you are often found at the spear's tip of change. Change in the way that we find, make, and distribute content. And in a moment when we have all been going through lots of change, I know I had a pretty hard 6 months. I don't know about you, but that's a really important conversation to have. And so we shall have it. I'd like to set a little context before we go into the personal, because I think personally, this is subjective, but I think there is a combination of great respect, a little bit of envy, and perhaps some confusion about what does Moonbug do and how does Moonbug do it. So my first question is simply, how do you describe this thing in an elevator?
First off, thank you, Amy. Thanks for inviting me here tonight. Thanks to Susie and the whole CMA and everyone for coming. We'll get into more details later, but very simply, at Moonbug, we believe that the next Peppa Pig, 5-10 years from now, is being launched on YouTube now. What we try to do is find it, we acquire it, and we invest to try to make it better and distribute it to get it in front of more kids and families around the world.
I'll work there. I also asked you to summarize in videotape.
Yes.
Can you set up what you're about to show us?
Yeah, so we're going to see a Moonbug sizzle. This is a B2B or business-to-business video we play for companies that we are working with or trying to work with, and it's supposed to introduce who we are, what we do, and why we do it. So let's roll the tape. Thank you.
It's good. I like that tape. You could use that as a recruiting tool, too. You really...
And we don't, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get to the you part of the night, as promised. Describe to us the Yateman dinner table.
First of all, my parents are here. They're sitting in the back.
Oh.
I'll try not to let
Can you stand
that...
up? We got to clap you out. You raised this boy. Nice
Mom and
job.
Dad, can you stand up?
Yay!
So I'll try not to let that color any of my answers as best I can. But first off, so I was born in Boston on the East Coast, but we moved to LA when I was young. So I grew up in LA, spent most of my life here in LA. But I've always felt like I had a foot in each coast. And actually, people from the East Coast usually think I'm from California. People from California usually think from the East Coast. So either I belong both or nowhere.
I kind of feel that as a very East Coaster.
Yeah?
I feel your East Coastness.
All right. Jersey.
Your intensity, yes.
So I had a pretty academic family. I'm actually the only person in my family that works in business. Most people are academic or in kind of the medical field. So my dad's a cardiologist, doctor, my mom's a child therapist. working with troubled children, so that was always interesting, especially as I was a teenager, because she always knew, like, the clothes I wasn't allowed to wear, the music I wasn't allowed to listen to, the places I wasn't allowed to go, the times I wasn't allowed to be out after a certain, and all that stuff.
So you proceeded to do all of them?
I tried my best.
Yes.
Yeah. And then my younger sister, who's a few years younger than me, and she's actually a professor living in Denver, but this year living in England. Smart, yeah, much smarter than me.
So if I were to have the locker next to yours in high school, who do I see? Who am I seeing every day? Who are you in high school?
So I'd say I participated in a lot of stuff, right? So I like to do a lot of different things. Didn't do any of them particularly great, which is actually the exact opposite of career advice I give people, which is you really want to own something and be an expert in a certain field. That was not me in high school, for sure. I played a lot of different sports, none of them that great. Basketball, football, volleyball, and then baseball, soccer, and tennis a little bit.
Is there
not
enough
not in high
time
school,
for that?
but growing up, not well. I was in a band, kind of a punk / metal / hip hop band.
Nice.
We played a couple Sweet 16s. I think we played the Roxy on Sunset one time at like 11 a.m. on a Thursday or something like that, when like it's only parents and like, you know, friends that are there.
I've heard of your work. Yeah.
No, you have not.
What's the name of this band?
The name of the band was Firenze, which was named after our drummer's old sports car.
Okay. Were you good? Were you guys good?
We were really, really bad. My parents can attest. We used to play in yeah. My mom just gave a thumbs down. Our drummer came one day, we had practice, and he used the kitchen cabinets as the drums, and we were never invited. They were never invited back. We were not very good.
Really not very good. Like 1 to 10. 10
11.
being worse.
We were 11.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Spinal Tap
All right.
11.
What did you, at that time, when you were in a rock and roll punk band, think you wanted to be when you grew up?
So I'd say, till a disturbing age, I still wanted to be a pro athlete, probably till 13 or 14, but I was like this size until I was like 13. But I got past that. I actually wanted to be in the CIA. That's what I wanted to be.
Really?
What I wanted to do, yeah.
Why?
Probably reading too many Tom Clancy novels, but it was somewhat, I'd never traveled outside of the country, and it just seemed very exotic. I didn't want to spend all my time sitting in an office behind a desk, and I wanted to kind of get out there and do something that used your brain but was exciting and exotic. Yeah.
Do you ever, in your current life, regret that did not happen for you?
Never. Never. Yeah.
Because you watched Homeland.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I've made it past just the Tom Clancy novels.
I'm going to get off high school really, really soon, I swear. I'm just fascinated by who people were in high school. Were you one of those people that like was happy and liked high school? Were you like the in crowd, alpha guy?
So I think, playing sports, being in a terrible band, I was probably like relatively popular, but it was very up and down. So like for several years I was depressed. So I struggled with depression. None of my friends knew until I told them, and then they were shocked. But my mom, being a therapist, helped me figure it out relatively early on, which was really great. And therapy and medication and stuff. And then by the time I kind of was able to kind of move past it, by the time I left high school and went to college.
I'm really glad that you just said that. I think actually we, writ large, have done a relatively good job of anti-stigma. I have it in my own family, so I'm glad you said it.
Recently, right? Like more recently.
Yeah. So I think that is mental health, obviously, post-COVID is huge, so got it. So let's shift to work, but early work, like high school. Again, I'm stuck on high school. What was your first job, like in high school, college-y time? So
I worked like a lot of babysitter, camp counselor, a lot of stuff with kids at high school. But then I would say my first job, kind of office job, was actually I was an intern at the White House during the Clinton administration.
Oh, I was about to say under whom?
Under Bill Clinton, during when he was going for re-election, so it was 1996. And yes, Monica Lewinsky was an intern at the same time.
Are you serious?
I didn't know her, but we have like the picture of all of us with President Clinton, and I've gone back afterwards when all the stuff looking for her and stuff. I didn't know her, but it was just a kind of a crazy coincidence.
So was there scuttlebutt? Like, did you hear anything? Like, was it?
No, I knew nothing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. I was much too wrapped up with like my stuff than to worry about other people's stuff.
Did anything juicy ever? Like, well, first of all, what did you do in the White House?
I worked in the personnel security office, which literally was a huge vault, a room that had personnel files on all of the administration employees.
Really?
Huge, like physical files.
So you saw all the, anything juicy that you can tell us?
I mean, the other intern, I might have gone through people's files to see who had done what and who had maybe done what drugs and stuff like that. It's possible. It's possible.
But you'd have to kill me if you told me.
I can't tell you any of that, of course.
Because you're in the CIA,
obviously.
that's right. Yeah.
We keep secrets.
Great, love it, great. So, I asked you, so you've had a lot of jobs. So after this White House stuff, you've had a lot of jobs before you got into the kids media business, and we have this very short time. So I just want to tell you, this is not spontaneous. I warned Andy that I said, can you please get me to the Disney job in like 90 seconds by telling us each job you had till that time, what you learned. I have no idea what he's about to say, but can you get us fast?
I don't either. I'm about to figure it out.
To the Disney job, please.
So I went to college at Tufts in Boston. I moved to New York. I worked in investment banking, mostly because I had a liberal arts degree and I didn't know what to do. And it felt like a good way to maybe get some hard skills and afford to live in New York City on my own. And I learned very quickly that I did not want to work in a job whose sole purpose was just to make money. So that's what I learned from that. I went to, this was during the kind of 99, 2000, I went to a dot-com startup, which was high flying and then fast crashing. So I learned that, jobs are not necessarily forever. Companies are not necessarily forever, and things can change very quickly.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But I went to business school back here at UCLA. So for me, that was two things. It was moving back to LA, and it was also trying to move into an industry that I was actually interested in what the product was, right? So that was the entertainment industry. So that's why I went. Came back and went to business school at UCLA. And if you would ask me when I was leaving UCLA what my dream job would have been, it would have been to work in strategy at the Walt Disney Company. But I could not have gotten a job coming out of business school because I didn't come out of the certain 3 schools that they hire from, or I hadn't worked in the entertainment industry before. So I worked, and this is something that I tell people in terms of kind of career advice. I kind of did a stepping stone. So I worked in a company called Ascent Media Group, post-production company, but in the entertainment adjacent industry, and we worked with Disney. And through that experience, I got to know people at Disney and then ended up getting a job in strategy at the studio part of the Disney company.
Got it. That's something Tom Aschheim says too, the one jump thing, adjacency. Adjacencies are very good.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're in a realm that people in this room care about, Disney.
Yeah.
Keeping it relatively short, what'd you do there?
I did a lot of Excel and PowerPoint at first and different strategies.
Sounds great.
But the most interesting thing I did, and the only time I got to meet Bob Iger and present to him, was I did a business model for a direct-to-consumer movie streaming service. But this was like 2008, so this was 10 plus years before Disney Plus launched. But even back then, it was clear that there was something that he wanted to push. And we actually launched something called Disney Movies Online, and it totally failed. Oh. I think there's probably some lessons in that too, but that was a pretty interesting experience.
That is interesting. Yeah. So Iger was a futurist in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it took him a while to get the company there where he wanted to go. I think. Yeah.
So I believe next in line was Netflix. How did that happen? And this is Netflix.
So after doing all the Excel and PowerPoints, I did move over to do digital distribution. So I was basically doing deals, distributing Disney's content with new digital companies, so iTunes, Microsoft, Sony PlayStation, Hulu, as an example. And I got a call from a recruiter from Netflix. And Netflix was was still a DVD rental company, but was a, high kind of small growing company. But it was to work on the DVD side, so DVD content acquisition. And I said, thanks, super impressed with the company, but I just don't think I'm a DVD person. I'm all about digital. So, if you have a job in digital, whatever that was, right? But at the time, it felt like it meant a lot. Love to talk, and hung up. And I was like, I can't believe I just said no to Netflix, without even taking the interview, and thought nothing of it. And then 6 months later, the same recruiter called back and said, actually, we're launching this thing called streaming. We're starting to expand internationally. We're hiring first people to work on that. Are you interested? And I was like, yes.
You screwed up last time, yes.
Yeah, yes. So I did. I joined. So I was so Netflix had just launched in Canada, which was streaming. In the US, streaming was just part of what you got for the DVDs in the mail. And then we were starting to launch. And so Latin America was the first territory.
Right.
And I remember my
Did you
first
know
day-
what you were doing? Like, was it like, did you have any idea what you were doing?
Not really. So I sat down for my boss, my first day on the job, and she said, all right, so I got some important things to tell you. The first territory we're going into is Latin America. I couldn't tell you this during the interview. I was like, okay, good, Latin America. Know all about it, great, been there. Check, check, check. I want you to go, next week, I want you to go to NatP, and I want you to make offers to all the studios to buy their content for Latin America. I was like, okay, good, great, great. What's NatP? and NatP was a market to buy and sell TV shows that I had never heard of. Didn't know that it was in Miami. And 7 days later, I was in Miami making offers to all of the studios to try to license their content for Latin America.
Did you hang out?
So that was early Netflix days. It doesn't work like that today. I see Hannah from Netflix here and other people. It doesn't work like that, but it did at the time.
And did you get to hang out with Reed and Ted at that time?
I did. It was relatively small, so I knew them, decently well. So we did license a lot of content for Latin America, and we launched 9 months later. And the launch tour was, 5 cities throughout South America. So like Sao Paulo, Santiago, Buenos Aires, Bogota, Mexico City. Ooh, and I flew.
Said that very fast.
I got to fly with Reed and Ted and our head of communications at the time on in a G5 or a G6. It was the only time I've ever been in any plane like that. I don't even know what it was, through all those cities. And even at the time, I was like, this might never happen again. I should enjoy every second of this.
Yeah.
And that's true. It hasn't happened again.
Yeah. For any of us. How did the kids shift? How did you get from LATAM to kids?
So I worked in Latin America for about a year, launched the market, and then kind of raised my hand and was like, look, I'm not Latin American. I probably shouldn't be doing this full time, right? Like, you probably should hire someone who is and who knows the market better, which was a learning. And then I found myself back working on the North America team. For a while, I managed Canada for Netflix for like a year. And then I was managing the relationships with Disney, with a few studios, but Disney and Viacom at the time, which was the vast majority of kids' content on Netflix. Because this is when Netflix was streaming, but it was all licensed content.
Okay.
So in fact, most of it was your old company. Most of it was Nickelodeon company. And we had the contract was up. And there was a contract negotiation and renewal, and we didn't renew the Nickelodeon content, but obviously we knew it was coming, and so in preparation for that, Ted asked would I put together a kids content strategy, so I did. So I put together the first kids content strategy for Netflix, which was basically how are we going to replace all this Nickelodeon viewing.
Got it.
That was trying to answer the question, how are we going to replace all this Nickelodeon viewing, which obviously became a theme for them, right? In terms of companies pulling their content back and Netflix building up their own, library.
I want to ask you a personal question only because we're all living with the great correction that happened last earnings call. But so what was your business, were you paying those, I was about to say crazy prices, those very high prices that's changed how did you approach it?
So first of all, with people from Netflix here, I will neither confirm nor deny anything about crazy high prices. The truth is, everything was benchmarked against what we were paying for Nickelodeon and Disney, right? So it was like the whole thought process was, how do we replace all that viewing with just a little bit less money, basically.
Got it.
So that was kind of the benchmark.
Got it.
And I think that was true of other genres in terms of expanding from just licensing content from major studios to starting to acquire from independents and then produce their own.
So question, going from Disney, a very traditional company, to Netflix, and we've all heard about or read the HR PowerPoint about the culture.
Which became a book.
Yes,
we put out a book a couple years ago, yeah.
So how did you make that switch? Was it a culture shock to go from Disney to Netflix?
So yes, and I haven't told you this, but when I got the job for Netflix, my boss was like, I want to meet for coffee. And so I meet for coffee, and she was like, sat me down, she's like, all right, you think that you move fast because you move fast for Disney. She's like, but you think as fast as 60 miles an hour, and we run 90 miles an hour. So I just want to know, look me in the eye, are you ready to move this fast? And I was like, yes. Can I leave now? But But so example, so the culture is very different, and obviously, Netflix has grown so much over the time, and I can't speak to the culture today, but certainly when I was there, very, very different. So just a good juxtaposition is at Disney, I was negotiating deals with iTunes and Hulu and stuff, and I would negotiate a deal, and then my boss's boss's boss would sign the deal, right? So you'd have to go up the chain. At Netflix, one of the times we were scrambling to do our deals for Latin America, and actually I remember closing Disney, which was a big one for me, and it was late Friday afternoon. We needed to close it before the end of the day, and I was literally running around the office at Netflix saying, who can sign this? I need to close this deal today. And
Because I want to go 90 miles
somebody
an hour.
looked at me and was like, well, you did the deal. It's your deal. You sign it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so there's lots of examples, but I think that's a good kind of crystallization in terms of like, you did it, you're responsible for it, you sign it. You don't need to go get someone else to do it.
That is, that's the PowerPoint. So now you're in it. You're in it. You're going 90 miles an hour. You're negotiating. You're also signing. Blah blah blah. Flipping back to personal. So like, catch us up. What has gone on? What's your life about?
Well, my wife Lily is also here.
Lily.
So we met in college, so we've known each other a very long time, but we were friends. So we actually lived together first year out of college as young professionals in Manhattan, completely platonic, friends. People couldn't understand it. We became best friends, and several years later, when I was moving back to LA, is when we finally got together. And it was one of those things where everybody was like, oh, you guys are so annoying. People were like trading money, like the bets. My mom was like, what's wrong with you, final? So Lily and I have an older daughter who's 20, and then Lily and I have 3 girls, 14, 12, and 9, and so they were being born throughout this time. And to bring it back to Netflix, that was kind of right when I was doing the kids content strategy and thinking about more and more about kids content, and it was perfect, and it was an amazing time to be doing that with kids who were preschool and then early elementary, and just being able to watch things with them and see what they watch, and it was a really special time.
Yeah.
And even sometimes having them on set, and have them read scripts and stuff, let them be part of it was pretty fun. Not give notes, but just read it for their education. Yeah.
My kid
not
loved
outsourcing,
it's
but child labor.
So your Netflix departure was public. It was very painful. And for the room, I just want to be clear that before we met, I asked Andy if he would be willing and wanted to talk about his really painful Netflix departure, and I was really glad that he said yes, because there's a lot to learn in this story, and thank you for sharing it. So, what happened?
So I needed some water. They
Yeah,
needed some
exactly.
wine for it.
Mom, come here.
So this was late 2017, so it was shortly after, Harvey Weinstein and right in kind of, I would say, the early part of the Me Too movement, and I was traveling, so I always coach. There's a reason I get to this, but I always coach my kids' soccer team. So I still do. Our youngest, last night I was coaching the soccer team. At the time I was, and I was traveling. I was actually in Singapore, and I was going to England for a BBC holds like a children's media event, so I was going to that. But I came home specifically because it was the playoffs of our 9-year-old soccer, AYSO, like community soccer. It was very important.
Did they have a name, the soccer team?
It's different every year. I honestly don't remember what the most recent team is the Green Zombies, but I don't remember what the last one was. And so it was like Sunday morning, 9 a.m. I had just flown in the day before, and we're coaching, and I was like, no, don't use your hands, use your feet, and we're going that way, not that way. And a woman came up to me, and I'd never seen her before, and I was like watching the game, and she asked me something about a show on Netflix. And I'm going to intentionally not be using names, but a show that was on Netflix, not a kid show.
How'd she know that you worked at Netflix?
So I used my Netflix email address, which I think is one learning here, right? So everyone knew me as like the Netflix guy. Then I used my Netflix email address for everything because that's what I checked all the time, which is not something I would advise, and I try not to do that going forward. But she asked me a question about the show, and I said I had something non-committal. I didn't know what she was talking about. And then she asked about one of the actors on the show had been accused of horrific things. And what I should have said was, sorry, I can't talk about it. But for some reason, I got a little defensive about the company. I said something like, well, I think they're looking into it and don't think that it happened, or something like that, and which was an incredibly stupid thing to say. And then she said, well, I was actually one of the accusers. And And it happened. And then I looked at her for the first time. I was like, literally the game was going and my stomach was at my feet, as you can probably imagine. And it just felt horrible. I'm so sorry. Then she walked away civilly, but she walked away, and I looked for halftime, but I couldn't find her. And after the game, I went up to her and I apologized, and she said something like, I just want, I know you have daughters, I know you love them, just hope nothing like that ever happens to one of your kids. And I said, absolutely, I agree, I'm so sorry. And then 5 minutes later, the head of communications at Netflix called me. I was still on the soccer field, and said, did you just talk to somebody on the soccer field about the such and such a show? And I was like, yeah. And so what I didn't know, because it wasn't my show, I didn't really know anything about it other than what had been in the press and just talked about, was that the journalists had been trying to get Netflix to go on record about this. And they had just had a Netflix exec go on record about it on the soccer field Sunday morning. So it was clearly a really, stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. But there was no like malintent or anything like that, or even really knowing what the conversation was.
You were in the soccer.
I wasn't
you were in a
thinking
jag
about
mode.
what the conversation was until after I said it. So basically the rest of the day was spent talking to PR execs, my boss's boss, all that stuff. But the next day I was going to this event in the UK, and so the article hadn't come out, and I got on the plane, and that we had a stopover in Chicago, and we landed. When I got on the plane, nothing had happened. And when I got off the plane, obviously the article had come out because my phone just exploded. More messages than I've ever gotten. I had messages from people from high school, college, every business school, early, basically reaching out. And actually all like positive, was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I was like, oh God. So it's like, is this plane going back to LA? I got back on the plane, went back to LA. Initially got a lot of support from senior men, Andy did a dumb thing, but it was obviously not malintent, and but then eventually just kind of the mood at the time and the PR kind of negative situation, so I got fired, basically.
That must have been really hard.
It was, obviously it was the hardest, thing of my adult life. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Something that made it almost, harder, was my wife, who's here, Lily. She works at Disney at the time, and she knew turns out the woman's husband was the coach of the other team, and I didn't know, and she knew him, and so she emailed him something that day, like, Andy is such a supporter of women, had nothing to do with it, blah, 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 trying to be supportive of me. And he forwarded it to the journalist, who then published it with her work. So again, mistake, right? With her work email address, obviously not a smart thing to do. So people would actually literally were emailing Bob Iger and copying her, like, about what a terrible person she was and everything. So that was pretty hard.
She was a terrible person because she was defending
me, yeah. So.
Yeah.
No. Look, it was like I made a mistake, and this, one thing, there's probably several things to take away from it, but probably the biggest thing for me was just remember, especially if you work at a company, especially if you work at a big known company, you are always kind of on the record, as you're always kind of representing that company, or you have to be prepared to be, right? So I wasn't thinking that I worked at Netflix. I was thinking I was a parent on the side, but I should have been, and that was obviously really dumb. And but we make mistakes, and
the other thing is to not use your email address from work when you're coaching soccer. But yes, I wouldn't. I use mine, so so what happened after that?
So it was actually, in a lot of ways, it was like the most heartening kind of like time of my life, because I've never felt so supported. Like I think I told you, every single person I heard from was positive, right? Like this, we know you, it's not who you really are. Like people I didn't know were reaching out to me. A lot of people wanted me to go on the press, and I, of course, didn't want anything to do with it. I just wanted to move on and not, but I was definitely worried that I was never going to work in the industry again, for sure. Like, I thought that was a legitimate chance. So I was just hustling. Like, I was taking everything somebody came to me with. I was like, yes. So I think at a time I had 6 consulting jobs. I was doing 2 different business plans. I was trying to raise money for a new idea, and I was interviewing, talking to people, and just Lily remembers I was just driving all over, taking any meeting. I didn't pay for a meal for 3 months because people were so like wonderful, like, oh, I'll buy you lunch. You know, I feel bad. I'll buy you lunch. Okay, thanks. And eventually, and I had an idea that I thought of it as Blumhouse for kids and family, which for those of you who don't know, Blumhouse is a big horror company. Jason Blum has kind of pioneered this model of basically working with creators, letting them have more upside, but working for less upfront. And so the whole idea was basically working with creators, they keep IP, and then using YouTube as an incubator. And this was something that I actually tried to do at Netflix, was to use YouTube, because we would spend a decent amount of money, not necessarily high price, but decent amount of money on shows, and then work on them for many, many years, do some focus groups, but mostly it's all adults working on it, and then launch it and hope it works, right? So trying to test things on YouTube and get a quick read, relatively inexpensively, very quickly, of something that's popular. And my idea was, take 10 ideas, work with 10 different creators, try 10, move off from the 5 that don't get any reaction, work on 5, then narrow it down to 3, 2, and keep responding on what you get from the audience. And eventually you get an idea that is pressure tested with the audience, is based on actually real audience feedback, has some awareness, is out there in the world, and then you bring it to Amy at Warner Media, or Tara at Apple, or Hannah at Netflix, or whoever it is, right? Once you have that out there. And I was talking to a lot of people about this idea, actually, and there was definitely a lot of interest, but former colleague from Disney said, stop. I want to introduce you to someone. His name's Rene Reckman. He's the best boss I've ever worked for. And he's starting a company right now and raising money that's doing something that sounds like that, but with like an extra 0 or 2 at the end. And so Rene is the CEO of Moonbug and co-founder of Moonbug, so one of my bosses. And so he introduced me to Rene, who was, and we'll talk about Moonbug in a minute, but who was in the process of putting that together. And we stayed in touch and kept talking. And basically once he did, I joined to start the US office.
Wow.
He's based in London.
That is the insight of that was your Peppa Pig insight. That, the Peppa Pig of the future is
That's what we said at the time.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I just said was exactly what we said at the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're now employee number 2 at Moonbug. So you've been the first first kids at 3, whatever, it doesn't matter. What was Moonbug early days like?
So really scrappy. So we did have an office in London. That's why I did this, right? Of a few people, but in the U.S. it was me and one other person, Rich Hickey, who's our chief creative officer, so still with the company. And he and I were working. I had like a WeWork type office we worked out of. Then our main investor invited us to work out of their office in Beverly Hills, and we're like, oh, we've made it. We're in Beverly Hills. And we went there, and one day we're like, oh, this isn't gonna work. It was like you could hear a pin drop. It was like working in a library, and we're trying to start a kids entertainment company. And Rich is like, I'm gonna have writers and artists and animators in. I'm gonna have art on the walls. This isn't gonna work. So we sublet an office. We actually sublet from Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn has a little Hollywood-ish office on like Highland, and we sublet some space there, but it was like offices, and then upstairs that he had turned a conference room into a bar, like a full bar, legit bar, beer cans everywhere, Miss Pac-Man, a pool table, and we put a plank of wood on the pool table. That was our board. We all worked there. We had a team of maybe like 7 or 8. We worked there for about a year until Rene came to visit, and we were so proud. And we were so proud of the office. And it was great, and we had a team there, a bunch of young, great creatives. And he was like, "This is good, but like we're a children's entertainment company. You can't work out of a bar. Like it's time. This is all right. I'll approve. Get a real office." So we got a real office, and then we've since moved into other real offices because we've grown. We have about 200 people in the U.S. now.
200.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So again, whiplash, you must have going from Netflix to overly busy consulting to Moonbug, that must have been also a crazy shift in the way you think about things. And there was an interesting article in the Times, I guess it was about 6 months ago, that was talking about the relationship between data and insights and creative. And I'm curious, like, how did you adjust to a very data-driven or,
So part of our whole strategy, we haven't really talked about our whole strategy, is is you get so much data from YouTube, not about the actual viewers, but about what they like, what they watch, what are they responding to, how long do they watch, do they rewatch it, what they click on, et cetera. And we have a whole team of data analysts who mine that all day, every day. They package it up, and then they hand it to our creative team, and it's a brief. And so our creative team, like, it's not, and I always get nervous talking about that. It's not that like the algorithm is writing the content or anything like that, but our creative team, it is a certain kind of person who wants that, and they view it as it's great, as helpful. It's a part of the brief, right? It helps define the box to play in, kind of, you know? And so that's how we work. So it's not a science. It's definitely an art, but we try to bring as much science as we can in terms of data. So we literally have, like spreadsheets with all the episodes. And we make thousands of episodes a year because most of them are short form, and we put out a different episode a week for each channel. Yeah. We literally have spreadsheets. Every single episode has a data insight behind it, which could be kids love Halloween. It could be this type of dinosaur is more popular. It could be this type of vehicle is under, there's less videos about about excavators, but there's high demand, or this color tends to work, or this type of song, whatever it is. There's always some kind of data insight behind everything we do.
And do people, I guess you're saying there's it's a self-selected group of people who really dig that, and I can relate to that. You shared with me an amazing...
It is, but I think it's been an easier, I think it was a harder sell 4 years ago, and it's a much easier sell today.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
You shared with me an example, which I would love you to share with these guys, of something you loved but learned that the audience didn't, and sort of that relationship between what you want and learning.
Part of our model is very much what I had wanted to do with YouTube, that my idea, we do it in a different way because we acquire these channels, which has a big audience, but we will try things and we'll try shows, and we'll greenlight shows, and it might be 8 episodes of 3-minute episodes, so short form episodes. So it's an investment, but it's a relatively modest investment, and we'll have some insight, and our creative team will work on it, and we'll approve it, and we'll try it, and we'll put it on YouTube, and we see if it works, and we know very quickly if it works or doesn't. And it's not necessarily what the adults who made the show or approved the show like. So this example, we have a bus. So this actually, the first acquisition we made was a nursery rhyme animated channel called Little Baby Bum, very, very widely watched. One of the more popular characters, the most popular character when we looked at the data, was the bus. So we created a character, didn't have a name, called Buster. We gave him his own channel. He's now a show. It's on Netflix. It's on lots of different places. But one of the iterations we had was called Buster Rhymes, and it's basically educational hip-hop nursery rhymes, and I loved it. And everybody I showed it to loved it, all the adults. And we put it on YouTube, and it just didn't work. And we're gonna watch it right now.
Go Buster! I'm here to help you get to school on time, and on our way we're gonna bust a rhyme. My wheels are turning, so let's feel the groove. Come on, boys and girls, let's get up and move. Quickly now, because it's time to go. I'll teach you all of the rhymes that I know. I'm sorry, you probably want to know my name. I'm Buster, the bus, and rhyming's my game.
So I loved it, but our North Star of that is really audience. It's respect the audience, do what they want, and remember, it's audience first, and the audience didn't like it, so we did 8 or whatever it was, and we moved on, and we make a lot of Buster videos, but they aren't hip-hop.
Again, this is that shift in the way of thinking that I think is very, very cool. So let's go then to the monster hit that, is killing everything else. We would love to hear essentially the story of CoComelon.
So we don't think of it as killing everything else, but I know what you mean.
You love all your...
So we acquired CoComelon 2 years ago, so I had nothing to do with the creation of it, but obviously got to know the creators through the process. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is, I think CoComelon has just come up, the last couple of years. Well, the channel, and it was actually one of the very first channels on YouTube. It wasn't called CoComelon originally. It was called ABC Kids TV, which is a great title for search engine optimization, not necessarily a great title if you're trying to launch a brand that you can own. But they started putting videos out 2005 or 2006, literally before Google even bought YouTube. And week in, week out, It was a husband and wife. It was just them. They were doing these videos. Eventually, they got a big enough audience, and they started making money. Eventually, they could hire somebody. Eventually, they started hiring an animation team, and week in, week out, responding to what the audience did, making a little more so they can invest more in the content, turning it to CG at some point about 2017, introducing the family that's kind of the core family today in 2018. But what we're about to see is the very first video on the channel that became CoComelon, and see it's evolved a lot.
Let's go over the alphabet one more time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
H I J K L M N O P
Q, R, S,
G U V
W,
X.
Y, and Z.
Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
Wow.
So that was the first video. Hundreds of videos later, but constant iteration, right? Like improving, yeah.
What did you see in that?
Oh, we didn't see anything. We didn't buy that.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to understand how you.
We didn't buy that, but my point is that it's constant improvement. So these big properties on YouTube took many, many, many years. So Blippi, which is our second biggest property, started in 2018. This started in 2005, 2006. Little Baby Boom started in 2011. It took many, many years of building an audience, but also learning from the audience, responding to what works, moving away from the Busta Rhymeses and moving to different things, right?
Yep.
And that eventually we acquired CoComelon in 2020. It took us several years to convince them to sell.
Why? What were they scared of?
Well, I think first of all, they didn't need to, right? This is their baby. So I think they were scared of handing over their baby. And so we've made 13 acquisitions as part of the company. Every one has been a real process, like an emotional process. Of course, there's negotiation and money and everything, but it's an emotional process. It's the most important decision of their professional lives, every single one of them, right? And eventually what they decide is, A, I don't want to do this on my own forever, but B, this thing that I created, I want to see it get bigger, and I think it can get bigger as part of Moonbug. So those are the two things we've had to convince them, and it took us a while to convince them of that.
Got it.
But when we acquired it, it was an all-white family, right, with a few background kid characters. And one of the things that was very important to us was to obviously improve and increase the diversity in the show. And so we took one of the background characters, Cody, gave him a family, his parents have personalities, different backgrounds. One's Nigerian descent, one's Jamaican descent. We moved them next door to JJ, who's in the main family. They're best friends. He's in a lot of the videos. And now Cody has his own channel and has his own show. And one of the first videos that went out on the Cody show is the shopping cart song that we're about to see.
Okay.
And this is a little different for us was super exciting because it's playing a little bit into fantastical. You'll see it's Cody and JJ and their moms in the grocery store, and there's juxtaposition of what they see when they're in the little race carts, the race cars, shopping carts, versus what is actually happening in the real world.
And if you have little kids and you watch this all day, you can go get a drink at the bar.
Please keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
No time to stop. Pick up the pace. Pedal to the metal. We're in a race. Driving fast, driving hard. We're flying. We are turning fast, turning hard. We're racing. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Around we go.
So what makes a Moonbug property, how do you filter out and filter in?
Yeah. So we've made 13 acquisitions, which means we've probably looked at close to 100 different properties and gotten to know them. And so there's a few things. First off, we are data driven. It's audience size. Mm-hmm. There's a threshold. Obviously, CoComelon, you asked it had a big audience, right? Mm-hmm. So it gets in our filter because it has a big audience from whatever it is, right? Secondly, Does it have certain values? So for us, our core values are compassion, empathy, and resilience. Essentially, our company mission is helping kids empower with life skills, essential life skills. So CoComelon is not overtly educational, but every single video, there's a lesson. There's like we have that spreadsheet, there's a data insight, there's a takeaway, a life skill takeaway. So is it, so as an example, and it's not to knock what anyone else does, but we don't do any kind of kid influencers, right? Like like an 8-year-old in front of a camera. It's just not something that we feel like is something that we want to do. So audience size, certain life skills, certain kind of pro-social values. Third is, do we feel like we can grow it? And we're a private equity-backed company, so we have investors, so they're expecting us to grow their money, and we look at everything, and we literally say, can we make this 3 to 5 times bigger in 3 to 5 years? Either by improving the content, by growing the audience, by distributing the content on all different platforms. We want, for us, awareness and affinity is what we're always trying to grow, so we want more and more kids to know it and watch it, but we also want kids to love it, and we want parents to like it. So can we make it better by growing? Can we make it bigger? And we've looked at some, and we're like, it's got a big audience. We really like the show, but it's been around for a long time, and they've done all the things that we would do, and we don't think we can make it 20% bigger, but that doesn't work for us.
Got it.
So those are really the three things.
Thank you. I've always wondered. You have one last, in terms of CoComelon being the gift that keeps on giving, and this idea of characters, especially diverse characters. So
yeah. So Cody, we've been kind of working on really building up for the last 2 years, and this has been the year of Cody for us in terms of launching his own channel. Like the Cody toy was one of the nominated for Best Toy of the Year. But Nina is kind of the next character. So Nina is Mexican-American descent. And the most recent CoComelon video, which just came out 2 or 3 days ago, is kind of Nina's introduction video. So this is the Nina airplane song video.
And by the way, we're about to go to Q&A, so think of your excellent questions while you watch this video.
Hello, airplane. Hello, airplane. What is that? What is that? I will be your pilot. I sit in the cockpit and fly the plane. Fly the plane. Yay! Hello, airplane. Hello, airplane. In the sky. Watch it flying so high, up above it passes by. Go airplane, go airplane.
That's our last video. No more CoComelon videos. So.
That's really, to go from A to B to C, it's really kind of beautiful. Okay, you all, let's go to the fun part. Let's hear what you are wondering about. And by the way, please stand up, say who you are.
Sure.
This is all about building community, and then
Hi,
ask your
I'm
question.
Tanya Masad. I head up research at Warner Brothers Discovery. I have a question on animation style. Having been at Disney and sort of the focus on a certain style, what do you think kids feel about the animation style, and how important is that to the success of CoComelon?
So we think it's very important, and obviously I'm asked all the time, why is CoComelon so successful? And if it was an exact formula, we would make lots of CoComelons. So I think it's a lot more than that. There's something, but I do think that it's something in the look and feel, something about the eyes, something about the style that kids can at that age can resonates with them. There's certainly something about the repetition. We were talking about repetition is a key thing. What we try to do is repetition, right? Because kids learn through repetition, and they like anticipating what's going to happen and then being right. But we try to make it a little different every time, so it's not the exact same thing. But your question was animation style. There's also something for anyone like really animators, and I can't even articulate what it is, but there's something specific about the lighting, for example. So we work with several different outside animation studios, great studios, and every time it takes a really long time to ramp up because they will do like proper lighting, and that's not how we have to like unteach the lighters. It's something about the lighting, and we've tried to incorporate it. So when we acquired it, CoComelon had a team of 20 animators in Orange County. They work in the office right like 20 feet away from me. They still work on animating the show. We do a lot more, so we outsource, but we have that original team help train the directors of the different animation studios into that style.
Andy, you told me an interesting story about how the original creators and how you it was the unassembly line approach. Would you mind sharing that?
So basically, like most YouTube birth properties, they everything was kind of shoestring as they built it, right? So they hired their first animator, they hired a couple animators, they hired a few. All the animators they hired were straight out of school. So nobody had experience working on a show before. And they'd never made a show before. And so they developed, it was almost like one of our animation supervisors described it as the Galapagos Islands. It evolved on its own here over many years into something amazing, but very different. So it's not a process that's easily scalable, right? So like the animator kind of oversees everything, and then I don't know enough about it to get into more detail of like exactly how it works, but it's like a very different system that we have had to open up a little bit in order to work with other studios and in order to, because we're hiring a lot of people to work on that pipeline. But it was a very interesting system. For us, we didn't want to change it for the first year, but then we have started to once we feel like we get the key ingredients.
That's so interesting too, like how do you not rub the powder up the butterfly wings? Like the lighting being too good is bad.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Hassani. Thank you both. Andy, thank you for your time and candor, frankly. So I'm thinking about when you shared a little bit about that initial offer from Netflix, and you stuck to your guns, and you didn't accept the offer. You made it sort of seem as if you regretted it, but...
No, I didn't. No, I didn't regret it. Just when I hung up the phone, I was like, ooh, is that a big mistake?
Right. So you talked a lot about like things that you've learned during your professional experience, and I'm curious as to, because it seemed like it was fueled by conviction, So could you speak to some of those personal values that have informed how you've navigated your professional life?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've learned, and I think a lot of people, look, Amy invited a lot of her longtime friends here today who all work at different companies, and certainly I think it's particularly true in the children's media space where it's a relatively small community and people move around, right? Like I have lots of relationships with people where I used to be buying for them or I hired them and then now I'm selling to them. I joke along with a lot of people that I hired or basically I work for now on a daily basis. And so one of the things that I always tried to do at Netflix in a position of relative authority was like never confuse yourself with the seat that you're in, and you're going to be on the other side of the table at some point. And that's something that I think has served me well, not having been in that seat afterwards. And I think that's just a good lesson for everyone is like, the person that is pitching you something today, that pitch might not work for you, but that person might have an incredible show 2 years from now that you want to pick up or you want to work for them or whatever it is, right? So there's different power dynamics in every conversation, but never confuse that for like the person on the other side and what they bring and what the potential that they could bring.
Hi, I'm Rob Hahn. And aside from YouTube, are there any other fertile grounds that you're looking at for new content? I'm thinking podcasts, graphic novels, other places where people are making things that you might be looking at.
Yeah, so we've certainly looked at them. Anywhere there's an established audience that we think has the content has certain core values, the potential to be a franchise, and we can make it bigger, we'll look at it and do it. Kind of an obvious one that we're spending a lot of time on now is Roblox, right? It's a large open digital platform where people have created properties that have a lot of engagement, but kind of haven't really broken out beyond that platform. So we'll see. We haven't done anything in that space, but we're spending a lot of time. I was in like a week worth of meetings on Roblox, and then finally I had to come home and have my 9-year-old daughter teach me how to play the games, because like I just keep jumping up and down. This game's broken. Every game is broken. So like this is a humbling experience.
Hello, my name's Annie McQueen. Thank you so much for speaking. I'm just wondering, what do you think the future of children's programming is? And if that's too vague, then where do you see Moonbug in 5 years' time? Thank you.
Well, that was the question you were going to ask me.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Make up something new. And
Yeah, okay. I'll just say a couple things. 5 years' time. So if you think 5 years ago, and I tend to think of, maybe because of a background from Netflix, I tend to think of things from like the platform perspective first, and then how that impacts content and the audience and stuff. So 5 years ago, you know, YouTube was big, but there were pretty much no kids YouTube brands that were kind of known, I would say, like household names. Netflix was just starting to produce our own content at the time. Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Peacock, HBO Max, none of those existed. So think of how much that's changed. So when I'm sure some of the platforms will have been consolidated and will not be around. I would anticipate that TikTok becomes more known and established. I think it already has a lot of kids viewers, but I think it would be kind of more acknowledged, and therefore that will make the platform have to be responsible about protections for kids and kind of supporting kind of quality kids programming, which, by the way, we've seen YouTube make that evolution, and we work very closely with them. From 5 years ago, I would say they didn't to the same extent, and I think TikTok's gonna go on that platform or on that journey. But I also think that's also probably a migration more towards even, you know, short form content, maybe even shorter form content. And so for Moonbug, our best known shows are all preschool. We intend to stay in the kids space, so we think of it as 8 or 9 and younger, but we certainly want to expand in terms of IP that comes from different places, whether that's Roblox or TikTok or whatever the platform is that any independent creator can find a big audience.
Hi, Sean from Hyperbolic Audio in New York. Do you see a future in interactive programming? There's been, you know, various pseudo-interactive programming with Blue's Clues and Dora the Explorer and things like that invite children to interact with the television, but it's still a viewer content, and with iPads and iPhones and things like that, it seemed like there was this possibility of kids interacting with the entertainment, but I haven't really seen it, you know, manifest. Do you see that as something?
We tried that at Netflix. We experimented with it, and I was a big champion of it. One of kind of the two main champions of trying kind of interactive storytelling. And I think there are some technology reasons why it was challenging. So for example, most of the Netflix viewing, at least the watch time, at least when I was there, is actually on the TV, which means a remote control, which makes it more complicated than it is for an iPad. But I personally still do believe that's kind of the direction that we're heading. But there are a lot of data points that maybe when people sit down at the end of the day, they just want to sit back and be entertained. So, and obviously interactivity, right? I mean, gaming is huge and growing, but I do think there's something there, but I still think there's a big thing for people who just want to sit back and I just want to relax for 30 minutes. Not have to make decisions.
I've always wondered whether it's a build it and you will come. Have we just not seen a good enough interactive story because people aren't spending money on it because they're not sure? And that if somebody were to come out of the box with something truly extraordinary, somebody's gonna, I think.
Somebody will.
That's my own opinion.
Maybe somebody here.
Maybe somebody here. We're gonna take one last question before we round out the questions with questions for our alum. So, Donna, do you wanna round it on out?
Sure. So I'm Donna Friedman Mayer, a very close friend of the beloved Amy Friedman. So my question, actually, Annie took my first question, so I came up with another, which is that this room is filled with a lot of newbies in this business, a lot of young, amazing, talented, smart, aspiring, passionate creators.
My God, Donna, whoa.
It's true, and one of mine is right there. I was a mentor, am currently a mentor for CMA, so I highly recommend be a mentor, be a mentee. It's awesome. It's really been an amazing experience. So my question to you is, and there's a number of us veterans in this business, if you were to give advice to all of us, and it could be the same piece of advice, or two different pieces of advice for each end of the spectrum, what would you say to us?
So there's a lot of people in this room that I would ask for them for career advice. So first of all, I think certainly for like people trying to find out their path and everything, I would say get your foot in the door and then just make yourself useful. Like we hire a lot of young people at Moonbug, their first job, their second job, And you can tell quickly some people come in and they just do the job that's given to them, and then that's it, and that's okay. But then there's some people come in and it's like, well, I did this other thing too, and it looked like you could maybe needed that actually, and did you think about this? And those people were like, okay, give them more, move them over here, promote them, move them around, and that's something, just try to make yourself useful in whatever way and valuable in whatever the content, even if it's starting out like, you know, scheduling meetings, you know, whatever, like make yourself useful, go above and beyond, and then you get more responsibility, I think. I think that's my best answer.
So that's for the young ones. For the old ones, like me, I do think that having a younger mentor is so important. I feel like if you are old and you are only hanging out with old people, you are so screwed. So hang out with young people that have a lot to teach us and hire them. They are, I was about to say they're better than us. They're really amazing. All right, we are really lucky to have four, Suzanne's parents are sick, alums here. And I wanted to pose a question to our alums, and the question is this. Since you personally, and I will remind you what year you sat in the chair, have sat in the chair, what have we as a community accomplished that we can be proud of, and what is still missing? And so, remember that question because each person is going to answer it. So I'd like to start with Nancy Cantor. Where are you, Nancy? There you are. Nancy was my very first.
I didn't know that until you told me that the other day, actually. That's amazing. Hi, everybody. It's great to see such a good turnout for LA, especially, right? You know, I think the thing that I've seen that I'm most appreciative of that has manifested itself since 2012?
10. Yes,
2010.
you were just launching Disney Junior.
Right, exactly. Is the diversity that's represented in kids programming. I mean, that is really just a sea change in the way shows just simply looked from, 20 years ago for sure, across every platform. And it's become a focus, it's become a priority, it's become an awareness that I think we've really delivered on. So I think that's tremendous. The other thing is the distribution. I mean, 12 years ago, there were basically 3 networks. You sold your show to Disney, you sold your show to Nickelodeon, maybe you sold it to PBS and a little bit to Cartoon Network, and now there are just, so many more places for content to be on, which is exciting and a real opportunity that certainly we didn't have when we started in the business, and you had 3 people to talk to. And I think there was also, in that intervening 12 years, there's been a real appreciation and an understanding of the value of kids' television. I think the challenge that we're facing now is how do we keep that interest and value alive, because we are no longer in that 3-network linear business. And the business models and the priorities of other types of distribution are much different than when you were relying on either advertiser support or purely franchise and merchandising. And I hope that we can keep that up so that there isn't sort of a flattening of interest in the innovative content that I think most of us are really passionate about.
Thank you, Nancy.
There you go.
Tom Aschheim sat in the red chairs in real life and then also in public. And that was 2012, Tom, I think. You were, yeah.
You make me feel really old. Hi, guys. That was really fun. Thank you. For all of you who are here, never go after Nancy. She's very articulate. It sucks. As I was thinking about this, I'm going to sort of break the rules ever so slightly. I think something that I was very proud of that so many of us worked on for so long was making the importance of children's television show up during the cable era. And why it was important was when there were 3 broadcast networks, kids was always kind of in the corner, right? It was Saturday morning and a little bit in the afternoon, and it was kind of it was like the children's table. It sucked. It created a whole lot of innovation and a whole lot of creativity that was super great. And I think with the demise of cable, ever so slowly, but nonetheless the demise of cable, and the flowering of so many other places, there is great chance for innovation. But the big platforms feel a little bit like the big broadcast networks, right? They have something for everybody. They have amazing content. But children's, I think, has become less important. And I think the power of children's programming for children and for the industry is getting a little less love than I wish it did. And so I think this room has the potential to remind people how important it is. And it was important for cable because it built the business, right? It was a big driver of distribution. I think it is a big driver potentially for all the different platforms we have today. And I don't know that we have rallied as a group of people to remind people that this is crucial. So anyway, that's my sense of what's been done.
Amen. Next up is the Fred Seibert. And as the mic goes to him, I just want to say that I told Fred to be Fred. And so whatever he says, you may be offended by what he says, but
blame you.
This is this man, and he says the truth. So Fred, just be your whole self.
So I come from the rock and roll generation, and it's over. And gaming has taken over as the cultural center of the universe for young people. You know, we have the streaming, we have all the different kind of stuff. But to me, the biggest change is how much less important we all are. That the world having exploded like it is, you know, I came into the business when the average home in America had 2 channels of television. And I worked on MTV and Nickelodeon. There were 30 channels, and we were like, that's unbelievable. And then they said it was going to be 100, and then John Malone said it was going to be 500. The last time I heard, YouTube alone has 31 million channels. It's probably 41 million today. And we have Instagram, we have all the, you know, TikTok. All those people are more important than we are. And, you know, Andy's business is taking advantage of the fact that those people are more important. The couple that came up with Coco Melon, like, would that have ever happened? You know, in the universe, the professional universe that most of us live in? Amy asked me to come and speak in terms of what we've missed. Amy asked me to come and speak to a group that she was working with many years ago, and I offended all of them by saying that when I got into the business, I came out of broadcasting, and all of us who joined cable, we knew that broadcasting was fat, fucked up, and over. We knew it in our bones, and we didn't care. And now, you know, any of us who have worked in cable, I worked in cable for most of my career, it's fat, fucked up, and over. And boy, streaming is working really hard to convince everybody that they're fat, fucked up, and over. But when it comes to the kids business, here's the biggest thing that I'm missing, not just the last 10 years, the last 20 years. Until today, when Michelle was talking, nobody in the kids business has ever talked to me about kids. A little bit in preschool. Sometimes they throw research in your face as to why they can't do something because our research shows that kids, blah, you know, whatever bullshit they come up with, you know, that day. No one talks about kids. And I will tell you, the day I got into the kids business, I didn't want to be in it. I just needed the money. Like, I didn't have any money, I didn't have any work. They offered me some money, and I got the lesson of my life from Geraldine Laybourne, anybody who knows Jerry, because she didn't really know anything about television, at least as far as I was concerned, but what she knew about was kids. And she, for the next 20 years, brought me to school to think about kids every single day that I was in the business. In fact, I was in the kids business for 15 years before I had children. And the best parenting lessons I got were those 15 years where we didn't talk about shows, we didn't talk about stars, we didn't talk about scripts, we didn't talk about series orders, we talked about kids. And no one has mentioned them to me in my business in years. And I really miss it.
Yep. Thank you.
I hope I wasn't too offensive. By the way, one other just small thing. When I walked in this room earlier tonight, I was so depressed because I saw 4 black chairs. And I was so excited when I went out and I saw the 2 red chairs sitting there. I thought you'd given up.
No.
So,
No,
thank you.
never. Last is Tara, who's right there. Tara was right before COVID. So
Fred, you were supposed to tell us what we did right first. Did you?
That's
your
job.
He thinks that the TikTokers being more important is a good thing. That was his positive. He just sounds mad.
Well, I was 2019, so I only have a few years to reflect on, and I think what I wanted to say to this group, I think we've done a really good job with supporting one another and building on community. Susie talked a lot about what CMA stands for. I think in COVID, it was sort of tough for everyone, and I think the purpose of children's programming and who we were serving was really important, but I think a lot of us were sort of suffering, and so it was really nice to see that support so that we could do our jobs and not forget about the children. The thing I think we're missing, though, or we could do a better job at, is really keeping kids in kids' content and not watching stuff that's wholly inappropriate for them. And I don't believe it's because we're not making great content. I think it's because we're not looking around corners and we're not thinking ahead, and maybe we're under-resourced because it's not only about building it, but I think it's trying to sort of build stuff and be efficient in how we do it so that, to Tom's point, people do understand the value of kids' content. It's not just important, but it's also efficient. So for all the people sitting in those offices with Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints, we've always been fighters and sort of, the sitting at the kids' table and getting the sort of scraps, but we've been successful because this stuff is important and we've done it really efficiently, and so a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention until you have a Cocomelon or SpongeBob or so anyway, I think we need to, there was that sort of chart about all the different sort of tentacles of the business, and I think we need to get all those people sitting together in a room to talk about how we can sort of reinvent and innovate to keep kids who are not thinking about traditional content really anymore, unless you put Squid Game in front of them.
Yes, yes.
Which we shouldn't do, which we should not do, just in case that wasn't clear.
So we were going to ask Andy what we think is going to happen in 5 years, but you did that, whoever you are. That was a great question. So we're going to end by giving Andy a little present. Hang on. So, Andy, thank you. Thank you for coming. Here's a present for you.
Thank
and
you
we
very
hope
much.
it keeps you. It's a very, I was gonna get you chocolate. I was gonna get you mediocre chocolate and excellent tequila, but I didn't rent a car, and so I just didn't feel like taking the Uber. So instead we got you this. It's, well, you should open it.
I will open it. So it's not tequila.
It's not tequila, it's not chocolate.
It's a great wrapping job. It's like an Andy Yateman wrapping job. It's a clock? It's a watch?
No, it's a, you have to open it. It's a compass.
It's a compass.
It's a compass because you.
I get lost?
Yes, you get lost. No, you're a guy who has been finding his and therefore our true north. So this is a vote for keep on looking for the future thing that we are all looking for. And I wanted to, just thank you for being so honest and fun. And I also wanted to call back up the CMA team. The people who made this happen, again, like I told you what New York is like. It's like literally the chairs and my van. This was an incredible and will continue to be an incredible party. So I just wanted to call out Pinch Lee, Karen Martin, and Susie Dominick. And I think Susie Susie, I'm throwing back to you.
All right, let's have one more hand for these guys. What an incredible conversation. We really, really learned a lot and grew tonight.
Thank you.
So as Amy says, we're now all gonna drink. But we also have food because I'm starving. We've got lots of fun for you. We have a selfie station over here. We have a headshot station over there. The amazing Angela Parrish, who is the vice president of our LA office, is gonna sing live for us outside. There's food outside. Bar here, bar there. Oh, a merchandise pin, merchandise too. Don't forget to get your sweatshirt or your t-shirt. But have fun, and we really appreciate all of you for coming.